Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I'm Michelle Rutherford.
And I'm Everett Casimir. We, of course, do begin with that breaking news. Pope Francis has died at 88 years old, just celebrating, as you mentioned, Easter services yesterday.
It will be a day of mourning, of course, as many remember the life of Pope Francis. There are roughly 2 million Catholics in our area. We're going to go right to NBC5's Lisa Chavarria live for us this morning from Holy Name Cathedral. Lisa, I know it's early. Have you seen any faithful out there so far this morning?
It's still quiet out here so far this morning, Michelle and Evra, but I'm sure that is going to change as the hours go on and as more people begin waking up to learn about the death of Pope Francis. He died, according to the Vatican, at 7:35 this morning in Italy. And again, this was less than 24 hours after he made his last appearance on Easter Sunday. We want to show you that because this is the last public images that we have of the 88-year-old pontiff. He was not able to celebrate Easter on the piazza. He was unable to also lead Mass because of his illness that he'd been dealing with, but he briefly spoke to the crowd of thousands below in St. Peter's Square. His last words to the public were, quote, "Brothers and sisters, happy Easter." Pope Francis had been recovering from double pneumonia for quite some time, and just within the last 24 hours, he also had a chance to meet with Vice President J.D. Vance. The two met yesterday at the Vatican. We're told that Pope Francis gave Vance 3 big chocolate Easter eggs for the vice president's 3 children, as well as a Vatican tie and rosaries. Now, this comes after the two publicly clashed over the Trump administration's migrant deportation plans. Now, just within the last few minutes, we had a chance to hear from Father Michael Flager weighing in on this devastating loss of Pope Francis. In part, he said, quote, "His voice of conscience will be terribly missed in these times as we are watching the very soul of America being stripped away being stripped away each day." He's saying this in reference to the deportations, and that is something that Pope Francis was very vocal about. But again, putting politics aside, putting other opinions aside, both the vice president and the pontiff did have a chance to meet. Now, the vice president had just converted to Catholicism back in 2019. Now, as far as here in Chicago, we are waiting on the Archdiocese of Chicago to speak with us. They are preparing a statement, and hopefully we will have much more from them in the coming hours. Reporting live just outside of Holy Name Cathedral, Lisa Chavarria, NBC5 News.
Pope Francis, known as the voice of the people. Many will be heartbroken learning this news this morning. Lisa, thank you very much. We're getting a live look this morning now from St. Peter's Square. Looks like we're having some difficulties, so we'll have to get back to that. But again, as Lisa said, we just saw the Pope in St. Peter's Basilica. We can tell you hundreds of mourners are already gathering this morning in Vatican City, just hours after learning of Pope Francis's death.
Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio was elected Pope back in 2013 when Pope Benedict abruptly resigned. He was actually the first to come from Latin America and the first to choose the name Francis. NBC5's Marianne Ahern has more on his life and the legacy that he leaves behind.
Franciscum.
Jorge Bergoglio was chosen to be Pope in March 2013, taking the name Francis. The son of Italian parents, he was raised in Argentina. After becoming a Jesuit priest, he rose through the ranks to become the Cardinal of Buenos Aires, and eventually the first Latin American Pope who immediately represented change.
He spoke of how the church needs to be a field hospital, that the church can't be locked up in its 4 walls, self-referential, talking to itself.
Francis's message centered around living simply, embracing the poor. On one of the most divisive issues within the church, when asked about a gay priest, Francis said, "Who am I to judge?"
It did touch a nerve. So it's not only just to people who are gay and lesbian, the LGBTQ community, but it's also people who are divorced and remarried. Folks who are struggling with life.
The first in 600 years to take over after a papal retirement, Francis considered more liberal than Benedict. He visited the United States once, speaking to Congress, and huge crowds attended masses in New York and Philadelphia. Francis expanded roles for women in the church, but did not support women priests. He also spoke out against the invasion of Ukraine and denounced President Trump's deportation policies, even sparring with Vice President J.D. Vance.
Pope Francis had a remarkable ability to connect with people and to make people feel like he understood them and that he was working with them and praying with them. His loss is really a devastating personal loss for many.
After the funeral, there will be a conclave at the Vatican, a secret meeting with 138 of the world's cardinals under the age of 80 who will choose the next pope.
People are going to look back on this papacy as a historic moment in the life of the church, much like we did with Pope John the 23rd. It offers us a turning point.
And the world's nearly 1.4 billion Catholics wait to see who will succeed Francis. Marianne Ahern, NBC5 News.
Our thanks to Marianne there. Of course, we're going to have continuing coverage of Pope Francis's death and the next steps for the Catholic Church. We're going to bring you updates throughout the morning, live updates, and on our NBC Chicago app as well. We'll also have a statement from the Vatican coming up in just a little bit.
Of course, Chicago will certainly feel the loss of the pontiff.
Yeah, the Archdiocese of Chicago serves more than 2 million Catholics. Let's go live now to NBC5's Lisa Chavarria. She joins us outside of Holy Name Cathedral. Certainly a sad morning, Lisa.
Oh, most certainly. A day of mourning is beginning for so many Catholics, not only here in Chicago, across the country and across the world. The information that we're getting this morning from the Vatican is that Pope Francis died at 7:35 this morning, Rome time. That would be at 12:35 Chicago time. Cardinal Kevin Farrell, he formally declared that Pope Francis had died. Farrell, who is Irish American, has the title of Chamberlain. Now, I want you to take a look at this. This is the statement that we received early this morning from the Vatican, and it reads in part, quote, "The Pope's entire life was dedicated to the service of the Lord and his church. He taught us to live the values of the gospel with faithfulness, courage, and universal love, especially in favor of the poorest and the marginalized." The 88-year-old pontiff, he was not able to lead Easter Mass. He did appear, however, in his wheelchair and briefly spoke on the holiday to a crowd of thousands that were below in St. Peter's Square. His last words to the public were, "Brothers and sisters, happy Easter." Pope Francis had been recovering from double pneumonia. Vice President J.D. Vance also briefly met with the pontiff yesterday at the Vatican. Pope Francis, while meeting with him, gave Vance 3 big chocolate Easter eggs for the vice president's 3 children, as well as a Vatican tie and rosaries. This comes after the two publicly clashed over the Trump administration's migrant deportation plans. Now, if you're wondering what are the next steps as the Vatican is dealing with the loss of the Pope, the cardinals are now being called to the Vatican to prepare for the election of a new Pope. Now, the bells of St. Peter's Basilica have already tolled, after other bells in Rome are going to be joining as well. As far as what we could see here in Chicago, that's what we're working to find out. The Archdiocese of Chicago, it tells us that they are going to be sending out a spokesperson at some point to speak to us just about the impact that the Pope's loss is having, not only here on this city, but here in this country. That is the latest from Holy Name Cathedral. Lisa Chavarria, NBC5 News.
Shocking announcement, Lisa. Thank you very much. And we're going to go live to another picture from Vatican City. As you just heard from Lisa Chavarria, in just the last 24 hours, this is where the Pope made his final public appearance, delivering that Easter blessing.
Yeah, and Pope Francis was known for advocating for a more compassionate papacy and a less traditionalist approach. Mark Barger reports.
Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio
Buonasera.
was elected Pope when Pope Benedict abruptly resigned in 2013. Bergoglio chose the name Francis after St. Francis of Assisi, known for his poverty and humility. Francis was the first pope to come from Latin America and the first to take the name Francis. In his opening appearance as Pope, he asked that people pray for him. Francis became the leader of an estimated 1.2 billion Roman Catholics at a time of a number of conflicts for the Church: a sex abuse scandal, a financial scandal in the Vatican Bank, and conflicts over the issues of abortion, homosexuality, and the role of women in the Church. Within days of beginning his papacy, Francis made choices that revealed he would be a different kind of pope. He shunned the regal garments and trappings of previous popes, he paid his own hotel bill in person, and he chose to live in a modest apartment instead of the lavish papal residence. It was clear from the start that Francis loved interacting. He kissed children, wore hats from the crowd, and posed for pictures.
Don't get tired of bringing the mercy of the Father to the poor, the sick, the abandoned.
Within the first year of his papacy, he apologized to victims of sexual abuse by priests and set up a committee that included lay people to investigate sex crimes by priests. The wave of sexual abuse scandals within the church proved to be the greatest crisis of Francis' tenure. In 2015, he was criticized for supporting a Chilean bishop who was accused of covering up sex crimes against minors. Francis later admitted mishandling the situation and asked for forgiveness. Another abuse bombshell rocked the Catholic Church in 2018. A scathing grand jury report detailed decades of sexual abuses by priests in Pennsylvania.
Holy Father knows this is very serious. Holy Father knows this can shake the faith of the people in the pews.
The Vatican condemned the abuse as criminally and morally reprehensible and said Pope Francis was on the side of the victims. Through it all, Francis maintained his reputation as a reformer. He set up a hand-picked committee of 8 cardinals to discuss reforming the Vatican bureaucracy. He made headlines for his apparent acceptance of homosexuality and for warning about the dangers of climate change. Pope Francis also played a key role in the talks to restore full diplomatic relations between the U.S. and Cuba in 2014. He also spoke frequently about the importance of women in the Catholic Church and changed the Church's stance on the death penalty, declaring it unacceptable in all cases. Having had part of one lung removed as a young man, Francis had long battled health problems, especially bouts of acute bronchitis in winter. In recent years, he had been using a wheelchair, walker, or cane when moving around his apartment. Mark Barker, NBC News.
And we are going to have continuing coverage of Pope Francis's death and the next steps for the Catholic Church, including when the funeral will be held, when the conclave will happen, and more. So we're going to have updates throughout the morning, and on our free NBC Chicago app, you'll have the latest alerts there.